Join us now is Tom Bevan from Real Clear Politics. We thought a good day to have him to talk, where we are in the midterm elections, given that there were a bunch of primaries around the country. Tom, good morning to you.
Good morning, Brian. Great to be here.
All right, look, listen, I always start my day by looking at Real Clear Politics. It's a great place to go and get a compendium of what's going on with all political reporting around the country. And we have the reporting in from some of these primaries. I think the one everybody was looking at and was very interested to see how it would come out was the Mitch McConnell race out in Kentucky. Mitch McConnell handily beat a guy by the name of Matt Bevan. I assume no relationship. It was it was no surprise that he did that, but this was a Tea Party challenger who was initially thought to have a pretty good chance.
Yeah, you're right, and he turned out to be sort of, not a great candidate, and he had to play, in his defense, he ended up playing a lot of defense because Mitch McConnell's team really did he ran a very aggressive campaign and had a lot of oppo research on him, and so it turned out to be a struggle. McConnell famously told the New York Times a month or so ago that he was going to crush all of these various Tea Party-related insurgencies, and he certainly did that in his case. And it wasn't, to your point, it wasn't really in doubt. I mean, there was some question of whether Bevan would get above 40%. He didn't even do that. He got 35%. Mitch McConnell finished with over 60%. So a resounding victory for McConnell in Kentucky.
But he's facing a Democrat by the name of Lundgren Grimes. He's Secretary of State. And it's that right now the polls show that to be a pretty close race.
That's right. And this is one of Democrats only have really only two pickup opportunities in the fall. One is in Georgia and the other one's in Kentucky. And the polls have shown she's a strong candidate. McConnell, his approval rating isn't great in Kentucky. But, you see this. It's primary season. The Republicans are beating up on each other right now. And you see the same thing in Georgia. Michelle Nunn is ahead of all those various candidates. So now the focus is going to shift to a one-on-one race, and McConnell will start to turn his attention to Lundgren Grimes and her record. And so we'll see, in a couple of weeks where the polls settle out. I think McConnell, it's tough to beat an incumbent, and he's proven to be pretty resourceful, but this will be one of his toughest races ever.
It's interesting to me, though, Tom Bevan, in a weird way. I mean, before this grassroots conservative Tea Party uprising against McConnell in this primary, most people around town would consider Mitch McConnell to be a pretty solid conservative voice in Washington, D.C. Because he's had this backlash against the Tea Party, does that, in a weird way, actually give him a little bit more credibility in the Senate should he become the majority leader when dealing with the White House?
That's an interesting question. I mean,
in other words, he can go to the media and say, listen, I'm not, the White House is trying to paint me as this crazy right-winger. I mean, even the Tea Party doesn't like me.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Potentially. I mean, look, I think the thing for McConnell really is, he didn't fall prey to. I mean, the thing about the Tea Party insurgency, especially in 2010, but again in 2012, is, and I think some people miss this, which is it was more of an anti-incumbent, certainly based around fiscal issues. But you look at folks like Bob Bennett and Richard Lugar. I mean, the problem is, the Tea Party looks at Washington and sees if you've been there for 30 years, you're part of the problem, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat,
Yep.
and they want you gone.
Yep.
And so that's what McConnell was facing. I think he did a good job of sort of defending against that, and I think he is going to. I mean, it could be. This would be the most interesting thing about this is if Republicans end up taking the Senate, and Mitch McConnell loses his race to Lundgren Grimes, and
wow.
That would be a very strange but very possible outcome in November.
All right. So look, overall, how do you see the battle for the Senate shaping up as it looks today? Again, so many of these races are not yet decided about who's going to run against whom. But I mean, when you look at things like the president's popularity, which Real Clear Politics has at 51.9% disapproval rate right now,
right.
Direction of the country, 63% of Americans on average believe that the country's headed in the wrong direction. That generally doesn't fare well for the party in power, which is the Democrats right now.
That's right. Another metric to look at is the generic congressional vote, which when pollsters ask voters, would you rather see Republicans in charge of Congress or Democrats in charge of Congress? Would you vote for a Republican or a Democrat? No names involved. And Republicans are basically even with the Democrats, which is a pretty good sign for them. They traditionally, on Election Day, do a little bit better than the polls, especially in a midterm where the playing field is a little bit, the electorate is sort of tilted their way. I think Republicans right now, if the election were held today, they'd take the Senate. They're in pretty good shape in a lot of these races, but you've seen folks like Mark Pryor. He's basically had a bit of a resurgence here recently as
down in
head
Arkansas,
into sort of the general election. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a close battle.
Tom, listen, Real Clear Politics, I join Brian Wilson in the praise for that site. It's been so good for so long at aggregating great news and the polls. But lately, you've been making news earlier this month with your interview with Mike McCurry, where he speculated, I'm not so sure Hillary is going to run. And it's this new web series, this video series called Changing Lanes, where you just throw somebody into a car and turn a camera on and start talking to them. It's almost like that taxi game show. How's that going? And whose idea was that? I like it.
It's kind of different and it's fun. I like to bill it to people as sort of a meet the press on wheels, a little bit more informal and a lot more interesting. We try and get interesting folks in the car and just have conversations with them about things. And we did. We had Mike McCurry in, drove him around Washington D.C. With this interview. He said he doesn't. He's one of the only people I think on the Clinton side who thinks Hillary's not going to run.
Yeah.
And we just filmed a new episode in New York City last night with Dr. Ben Carson, whose book came out yesterday, and that should be up on the site later today. And he said some interesting things as well. So it's a fun and new thing that we're doing. So definitely check it out on realclearpolitics.com. It's called Changing Lanes.
We're going to have Ben Carson on here Friday, by the way. One just quick note here: it couldn't hurt to have Mornings on the Mall with Brian and Larry in the background there in the car as you're driving these politicians around
why don't
Washington.
we just put you guys in the car and we'll go for a drive?
We're up for it.
Just don't let Wilson drive. That's all.
Wait a minute. I am right here. Listen, Tom, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. We hope to be checking in with you from time to time as we head down down toward the midterm elections in the fall. Thanks a lot.
All right, guys.